This is the story of Jacob, son of Isaac. Jacob continued on his way and went to the land of the east. Suddenly, he came upon a well out in the fields, with 3 flocks of sheep lying around it. The flocks were watered from this well, which had a large stone over from the opening. Jacob asked the shepherds, "My friends, where are you from?" "From Haran," they answered. While Jacob was still talking to them, Rachel arrived with the flock. When Jacob saw Rachel with his uncle Laban's flock, he went to the well, rolled the stone back, and watered the sheep. Then he kissed her and began to cry for joy. He told her, "I am your father's relative, the son of Rebekah." She ran to tell her father, and when he heard the news about his nephew Jacob, he ran to meet him, hugged him, and kissed him, and brought him into the house. When Jacob had told Laban everything that had happened, Laban said, "Yes, indeed, you are my own flesh and blood." Jacob stayed there a whole month. While he stayed there, Jacob looked after Laban's flock. Laban said to Jacob, "You shouldn't work for me for nothing, just because you are my relative. How much pay do you want?" Laban had 2 daughters, the elder one named Leah and the younger Rachel. Leah had lovely eyes, but Rachel was shapely and beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel, so he said, "I will work 7 years for you if you let me marry Rachel." Laban answered, "I would rather give her to you than anyone else." Jacob worked 7 years so that he could have Rachel, and the time seemed like only a few days to him because he loved her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "The time is up. Let me marry your daughter." So Laban gave a wedding feast and invited everyone. But that night, instead of Rachel, he took Leah to Jacob. Not until next morning did Jacob discover that it was Leah. He went to Laban and said, "Why did you do this to me?" Laban answered, "It is not custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the elder. Wait until this week's marriage celebrations are over, and I will give you Rachel, if you work for me for another 7 years." Jacob agreed, and when the week of the marriage celebrations was over, Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. Then he worked for Laban for another 7 years. When the Lord saw that Leah was loved less than Rachel, he made it possible for her to have children, but Rachel remained childless. Leah gave birth to 6 sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Later she bore a daughter, whom she named Dinah. But Rachel had not borne Jacob any children, and so she became jealous of her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children, or I will die." Jacob became angry with Rachel and said, "I can't take the place of God." Then God remembered Rachel. He answered her prayer and made it possible to have children. She became pregnant and she gave birth to a son. She said, "God has taken away my disgrace by giving me a son. May the Lord give me another son." So she named him Joseph. After the birth of Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Let me go, so that I can return home. Give me my wives and children that I have earned by working for you, and I will leave. You know how well I serve you." Laban said to him, "Let me say this. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will pay them." Jacob answered, "I don't want any wages. I will continue to take care of your flocks if you agree to this suggestion. Let me go through your flocks today and take every black lamb and every spotted or speckled young goat. That is all the wages I want." Laban answered, "Agreed, we will do as you suggest." But that day, Laban removed the male goats that had stripes or spots, and all the females that were speckled or spotted, or which had white on them. He put his sons in charge of them, and then went away from Jacob with his flock, as far as he could travel in 3 days. Jacob took care of the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob got green branches of almond and plane trees and stripped off the bark, so the branches had white stripes on them. He placed these branches in front of the flocks at the drinking troughs. He placed them there because the animals mated when they came to drink. So when the goats reproduced in front of the branches, they produced young that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. In this way, he built up his own flock and kept it apart from Laban's. Soon Laban had all the weak animals, and Jacob had all the strong animals. In this way, Jacob became very wealthy. Jacob saw that Laban was no longer friendly as he was earlier. Then the Lord said to him, "Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives. I will be with you." So Jacob said to Rachel and Leah, "I noticed your father is not as friendly towards me as he used to be. But my father's God has been with me. Laban has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times, but God did not let him harm me." Whenever Laban said, "The speckled goats shall be your wages," all the flocks produced speckled goats. When he said, "The striped goats shall be your wages," all the flocks produced striped young. God has taken away flocks from your father and given them to me. So Jacob got ready to go back to his father in the land of Canaan. He put his children and his wives on the camels and drove all the flocks ahead of him. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and during his absence, Rachel stole the household gods that belonged to her father. Jacob deceived Laban by not letting him know that he was leaving. 3 days later, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. He took his men with him and pursued Jacob for 7 days until he caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Jacob had set camp on a mountain, and Laban set up his camp with the kinsmen in the hill country of Gilead. In a dream that night, God came to Laban and said to him, "Be careful not to threaten Jacob in any way." Laban said to Jacob, "Why did you deceive me and carry off my daughters like women captured in war? You did not even let me kiss my grandchildren and my granddaughters goodbye. I have the power to do you harm, but last night the God of your father warned me not to threaten you in any way. I know that you left because you were anxious to get back home. But why did you steal my household gods?" Jacob answered, "I was afraid because I thought that you might take your daughters away from me. But if you find anyone here that has your gods, he will be put to death." Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen Laban's gods. Laban searched in Jacob's, Leah's, and Rachel's tents, but did not find them. Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in a camel's saddleback and was sitting on them. Laban searched but did not find his household gods. Laban answered Jacob, "These girls are my daughters. Their children belong to me, and these flocks are mine. In fact, all you see here belongs to me. But since I can do nothing to keep my daughters and their children, I am ready to make an agreement with you. Let us make a pile of rocks and a memorial stone to remind us of our agreement. Both this pile and this memorial stone are reminders. I will never go beyond this pile to attack you, and you must never go beyond it to attack me." Then, in the name of the God whom his father Isaac worshipped, Jacob solemnly vowed to keep his promise. He killed an animal which he offered as a sacrifice on the mountain, and he invited his men to the meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night on the mountain. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters goodbye and left to go back home.